We'll start. Today we are going to talk about evolving your API. So, thank you for coming here.
Thanks.
And I'll leave you the floor.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks to be here. Sorry, I just preparing the water. I know it's Italy, Southern Europe. Should I wait a few more minutes? No. Yeah, it depends on the conference. It depends where I am. So I'm Nicolas Fränkel. That's my first time here in the FESALP. Actually, it's my first time in Torino. Unfortunately, I came yesterday, and I will just leave today, so I won't have any time to visit. So you need to invite me again. For a long time, I was a developer, a team lead, an architect, and whatever. You need to be super flexible because I walk a lot. I cannot just stand. I'm sorry for that. I will make you work. And then I became dissatisfied with how projects are run, with stupid schedules, political moves and stuff, so I became a developer advocate. So now I say, before I was super dissatisfied when my customer didn't listen to me. Now if you don't listen to me, that's fine. I won't know it anyway, so that's good. So who here has already developed an API? Good. So probably it was a mess the first time, right? You had to think about like design your model, thinking about your entities, the boundaries, then thinking all about the REST stuff, and that is not clear at all, that people always argue about. And well, now adding on top of that, you have the regular like project issues, like of budget, whatever. So when you finish it and your business comes from V2, probably it looks like this. Because, yeah, you forgot about versioning, you forgot about upgrading, you forgot about success. You were so happy to deliver that you didn't think about the future. And it's normal. I mean, that's fine. So in this talk, my idea is to give you a couple of tips and tricks so that if it happens again, then you won't look like this. So first, a question. This is, in general, your API, and then you've a couple of endpoints, right? This is how it works. Yeah, okay, you all lied. This is probably how it looks. You have a reverse proxy. Who has no reverse proxy? Who directly exposes their API over the internet? You have no clue if you have a reverse proxy. You have no clue. Okay, that's interesting. So basically, you are a developer, you are not interested in infrastructure. Okay. So in general, you always want to have something in between your app and the internet. And my solution is easy. If you want to easily evolve your API, you make it an API gateway. Thanks. Do you have any questions? Great, thanks. Yeah, that would be too easy. So the question is, what's the difference between a reverse proxy and API gateway? If you look, there are multiple answers, so I will give you mine. But before I give you the answer, I need to go back a bit in time, just to make you understand the evolution. So I have gray hair, which means I still have hair, which is a good thing, but it also means I wouldn't say I'm old, I say I am experienced, which sounds much, much better. It's exactly the same. So I started a bit before the 2000s. Yeah, everybody was born at that time. Sometimes it's not the case, but today it seems to be the case. Which means that my first website, and when I say my first website, there was no YouTube at the time where you could see how you could design a website. Basically, you learn how to do HTML by looking at other HTML sites, right? It was like, of course, HTML with images. We add images. Who started without images? Without images, yeah. There was a time where you could browse without images and not with links, just with regular browser, there was no images. Yeah, a long time ago. I didn't know that. MIDI audio. Like you could put a MIDI file at the root of your website, and when you started the website, it would play stupid music. Who did it? It was really shitty user experience, right? Yeah, but we did it because we could. That was so fun. No CSS. So to have your nice buttons with bevel, now you had a table with border with different colors. Semantic web, anybody? And is there any JavaScript developer? So I won't comment whether no JavaScript was a good or a bad thing, but there was no JavaScript at the time. And at the time, I didn't think about it. I just put my files in an FTP folder, and I was super happy, and it worked, but there was a web server behind it. At the time, I think the most widespread one was Apache web server. I think mine was the Microsoft one. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure nowadays. And that was the only feature of the web server, like to serve static files. But it was not enough, because we wanted to have more dynamic stuff. For example, we wanted to have the time and the date inside the page. Also, like, what the point? But we wanted to do it anyway. Another feature that was more interesting was we wanted to have the last updated timestamp, which was much more useful. And we didn't want to do it manually. So we wanted some, like, dynamic stuff inside HTML. And at the time, there was one only way to do it was to have a CGI script in Perl. And I don't know who knows Perl. I don't know Perl, but basically, it's not the best language ever, even if at some point it was super popular. And the problem is, whatever the language, if you need a language to generate another language, it's a maintenance nightmare. So somebody came up with the idea of PHP, personal homepage, not hypertext preprocessor. That was just to have a veneer of like personal page doesn't look so serious. So that's the second feature that got grafted on the web server, that's to serve dynamic pages. And funnily enough, the web became more popular. Like really, really popular. So popular, actually, that companies wanted to use it as an official communication channel. Like if your website is down, it's not a big issue. If a company website is down, it's a big issue. It like reflects negatively on the image of the company. So you want to have a website that is always up. And for this, you need to have some kind of redundancy and load balancing. And now we have an additional feature of the web server that it serves as a load balancer. And actually we have two layers of web server. The first layer that do the load balancing and different nodes, redundant nodes that serve the same content, whether it's dynamic or static. And it didn't stop there. Because afterwards, we came up with words like intranet, extranet, whatever net. So before the nodes, they were all similar, but now the nodes, they are different depending on what you come for, what's your profile. And in this case, the first layer now doesn't do only load balancing, it does routing. Completely unrelated to serving something. And those are the evolution steps of the web server. First, you serve static content, then we serve dynamic content, then we did load balancing, and then we did routing. So it's not static stuff. And once you start having this like first layer of web server that doesn't do any serving at all, then as an architect, you tend to put more features because now you have a single entry point. So you put rate limiting, now you put authentication, authorization, whatever. You put everything. And in parallel, we add to do more communication with third-party organization. At the beginning, we did FTP, right? We sent like a formatted CSV file or whatever file to FTP server, and then on the other end, there was a batch running daily, running hourly, that processed the data, renamed the file to done. Are you still doing it? You are still doing it. Well, no. You remember, yeah. I mean, that was integration at the time, right? But now we want to have like more real-time synchronization. We want the data to be processed in real time. And the problem is if you send data to another organization, we need a common technology, a common way of talking. If I am a Java organization and you are a .NET organization, doesn't work. So the only brick that is common to everybody is HTTP. Then you can be Python, you can be JavaScript, you can be anything. So we rely on HTTP and APIs to do integration. And that's where the idea of the API gateway comes from. An API gateway should be able to do everything a reverse proxy can do, but catering to APIs. And the poster child for this is rate limiting. Reverse proxy, we do rate limiting since ages because we want to be protected against distributed denial of service attack, right? The problem, if you use it as a reverse proxy, you treat every client the same. But once you start doing APIs, perhaps some clients will pay to have a higher limit because it's in the requirement. And now you need to distinguish between clients. They paid, and they paid this, so they have this limit, and they paid this, they have a higher limit, and you pay nothing, you have a super low limit. And it's still possible to do that with a reverse proxy. I mean, if you are using Nginx, which is nowadays, I think, the standard proxy, you can have this kind of stuff in your Nginx. But it was not designed to have like business logic inside. So it means you would need to write your module in C. It means that you would need to reload Nginx every time you change business logic. And have you ever tried to like change the business logic or the configuration of Nginx in real time? Yeah, you need to switch it off and on again, right? Which, if it's the entry point into your information system, is not a great idea. So for this reason, we have API gateways. And my definition of API gateways, it's like a reverse proxy that is not adverse to business logic. So it's not only an infrastructure component, it's a dedicated business component. There are multiple reverse API gateways available. Here are the ones that are open source, that are available on site, but of course there are more. If you are a cloud user, then probably you have your own API gateway. The thing is, in general, they are quite limited. And the problem is vendor lock-in. I always say, like, I was born at a time where you had to use Windows on your desktop. It took us 20 years to get rid of it. I won't get back to you like being locked into a cloud provider. So here you have all the ones that you can install on premise. I personally work on the Apache APISIX one, of course, but everything that I will show you, you can do the same in the same technology. So just 2 slides on Apache APISIX. It's an Apache project. I assume you are familiar with the Apache Foundation, right? Great. So it's based on Nginx, which is good. To like fix the problem of switching it off and on again, there's something called OpenResty, which is a Lua-based JIT. So Lua, the programming language, which allows changing the configuration of Nginx in real time, which is really, really good. The thing is, you can do a lot, but it can be a maintenance nightmare. So on top of that, Apache APISIX brings structure. It brings concepts such as routes, service, upstreams, whatever, and it's a plugin-based architecture, so everything is based on plugin. So getting back to my solution, use an API gateway. And now it's time for some demo. which will be fun because I will need the mic. I will be creative. Works like this? Yes. Good. So here I have a project. I will start it and then I will explain it. And I will make it a bit bigger. And that's the fun of Docker. Sometimes it tells me that it's sleeping. The Docker Compose is here. So let me explain it to you. I have APISIX latest version. APISIX stores its configuration in etcd. etcd is a distributed key value store, so here I have an etcd instance. Then I have the dashboard. If I have enough time, I will show you how you can use the dashboard. Prometheus, because I want to monitor everything. Grafana, to have the display it graphically. And then I have the old API and the new API. Normally, I would just start with the old API and then add the new API, but it's Docker Compose, so I have put everything in one go. So the old API is a Java Spring Boot application. And, well, I assume you are not, who here is a Java developer? Oh, wow, that's a lot, okay. So, okay, it's based on, like, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like many annotations, which is not super cool, but still it gets the job done. So if I curl localhost 8081, say hello, it works. I can also say hello, devfest alps. That's how good a developer I am. And then I have the new version, which is, of course, much better because I'm using Kotlin. And I am doing everything I can without annotation, so like functional way of defining the Spring application. And the result is much better, right? That's a better Hello World. So I want to move from the old style Hello World to the new style Hello World through the help of the API Gateway. So the API Gateway, at least Apache APISIX runs on 9080, and I will just like make it smaller like this. And oh, what happens? 301. I have something running behind. That cannot be true. I have too many stuff running. Evolve, Grafana. I have this one. Sorry for that. I have too many demos running at the same time, so that was not the expected stuff. Okay, I need to restart it. Sorry for that. Yeah. That's very strange. Normally here it should say it's not configured. So I will Docker Compose down everything. That's perhaps something I didn't do yesterday, so it comes up already configured. The fun of the demo. Yesterday, I redid the demo and I configured everything and I forgot to bring it down. So here it says route not found because I just started the API Gateway, so it comes like completely initialized and you need to configure it. So how can we configure the API Gateway? Well, there are two ways, but since here I'm using the dynamic configuration, I'm using etcd, I can like send an API call to configure the API Gateway, right? So I'm using the Docker curl image, so you can do the demo at home and you don't need curl, just for fun. So I'm using the Docker curl image, I'm using the same network, and then I'm like using a dedicated route, which is a put, so I put the ID that I want to use because it's a very sensitive operation, right? You don't want anybody to just configure your API gateway. This is secured with an API key, but because this is the demo, this is a default API key. So don't do this at home. You need to use your own dedicated API key. And then you've got the data. There is an optional name. And the idea is if it matches the URI and the default methods, which are get, post, and put, I think, then it will forward the request to this upstream. And this upstream is the old API. So here you would be able to put multiple nodes with round robin or like consistent hashing or whatever. But here is just a stupid demo, so I have one single node and I always direct. So if something starts with hello, I will just direct it to the old API. And because I want it to be monitored, and I told you that Apache APISIX is plugin based, then I add the Prometheus plugin. So now that I run it, and if I go there and I do the same, then I have hello world. That's amazing, right? I'm back to square one, where everything worked as expected. So now we can actually start to do some stuff. And the first stuff that we need to do is to start to version it. There are different ways to version an API. The first one, the one that I will be using, is path-based, because it's the most visual one. But you can also do header-based. So you put a dedicated header. It can be a dedicated header, or it can be like an accept header. Both are fine. And then there is query-based that I've never seen in the wild, but you can still use a query parameter to specify the version. So here, as I mentioned, I will use path-based. Let's do path-based versioning. But instead of doing exactly the same, I will use Apache APISIX concepts, abstractions of upstream. So now I have another route called upstreams, and I will put one upstream with ID 1. Again, optional name and the node. So I run it. And now perhaps it's time to show you the local host. I think it's 9000, APISIX dashboard, and of course the password is not admin at all because I didn't keep the usual one. So here you can see the routes that I created previously, and here you can see the upstream that I just created. And now if I can also put the Docker, the plugin configuration. For example, here, I would like to monitor every one of my APIs. So it means I would every time require the user to set plugin Prometheus. And of course, at some point, somebody will forget and the route won't be monitored. So what I can do, I can create a global rule so that the plugin Prometheus will be applied to all routes by default. That's always something. And now I create the version route. So I will, again, create routes with ID number 2. It's still a put. I give it a different name. Now the URI will be /v1, and I reference the upstream ID. Okay, I will run it, and then I will just explain something else. So just let's check that now I have 2 routes, okay? And of course, it's not only you can see, but you can change the data directly. So everything is stored in etcd, but you can, here, change it. And here it reflects. Anyway, it's up to you. Either use a dashboard or use the API. Here, I also reference a plugin config. Why? Because I've created a dedicated plugin config here. The reason, if by default, I will forward v1/hello to the upstream. The upstream doesn't know about v1/hello. It only knows about hello. So I need to remove the v1 prefix. And again, it's a plugin-based architecture, so I have a plugin that does the rewriting of the URL. So here I reference the plugin config ID that I just created. Here it's another route. And now, if I write v1, it works again. But of course, now we have 2 routes. So what will people be doing? They will keep using the unversion route. Worse, there will be more people using the unversion route because they didn't read the documentation, or because they read it but there are less character to types, or they don't care. So basically you will be bringing more people to use the unversion route, and we don't want that. We actually want people to stop using the unversion route. So in this case, we can rely on our HTTP code. Why? Because we cannot contact the people, because we don't know who is using our API, because we didn't think about making them register. So we need to fall back on the most basic component that we have, and it's just HTTP status. So for that, we can do a redirect. Guess what? We can patch the route number 1, which is the unversioned one, and it's a plugin again, and we say, hey, redirect to v1 URI. Here is an Nginx variable, and we tell it 301, you can use 302, or you can use whatever you want. So here, now, if we do this, and I will be going verbose, it tells me 301 moved permanently. And here we have the location here. Now, if you are a user of the API, every one of your API call will break, which is a very nice lesson that you as a user should always monitor your API calls. But you can tell me, yeah, but we are smart developers, we do auto redirect. You don't see, and you told me nothing. Thanks. So, I thought in Italy you were super explicit. Okay, it's Torino, it's northern Italy, right? Doesn't count really. I saw the weather yesterday, it was not very Italian. Okay, thanks for your comments, for your feedback. So here, if I just call the inversion route, tells me 301, which is I wanted, it tells me the new location. Great. So now your API breaks, you need to monitor it. But if you are smart, and you are smart, you are doing auto redirect, right? You are doing this. Better? Sorry for that. Okay, 301, v1/hello, great, it breaks. Auto redirect, it still works. But now you've got 2 calls. You just doubled your number of calls. So again, it's worse because it still works, but you probably double your cloud bill. So again, very good lesson. Even if you are not providing APIs, but just using APIs, you should always monitor your usage.
Can you do a rewrite instead of a redirect?
You can do everything. What's your use case? What do you want to do exactly?
Because with a rewrite, you will have 2 calls.
You would do a rewrite. I don't understand.
You rewrite the ref instead of redirecting. Because redirecting is the browser has 2 words.
Yeah, but actually I don't want that, because I want that people stop using this endpoint. So if I just do it transparently, I don't move forward. I actually want that on the client side something happens. And the problem is it needs to be a breaking stuff, because I don't know how to contact the people who are using my API. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the problem is we don't know who is using our API. So now we need to make people register, but people don't like to register, right? Who likes to register? You don't. So we need to be smart. We need to provide an incentive. And so, for example, in that case, we'll tell people, you know what? If you register, you will get unlimited calls. Otherwise, you will be rate limited, which is a smart way to do it. But if you can plan ahead, of course, it's better at the beginning to make people register. But here, we are already in a state where people are using the API and we don't know them. So we need to find a way. And in this case, we can say, again, to register or you will be rate limited. At this point, again, it's a plugin-based architecture, but I have got no plugin for that. So I created my own plugin, which is in Lua. I'm not a Lua developer. Who here is a Lua developer? Good, I can show you the code because it really sucks. I use the rate limited plugin and I just added my stuff. So I copy-pasted like regular developer stuff, and I added the logic, and of course it didn't work at first, but well, I'm not stupid, so I made it work. And basically it says, if you are authenticated, you just return, and you don't go further towards the rate limiting logic. Okay, great. So how do you authenticate? Here in API 6, you can delegate authentication to OpenID Connect or to Keycloak or to other stuff. But here I'm using the most basic one. I'm using a consumer. I'm using a regular consumer. So here it says, if I pass a header with name API key and value my key, I will be authenticated as John Doe. Okay, great. So now I can, I don't remember if I run it. No, I didn't run it. So now if I call v1, I'm rate limited. Now if I say, hey, I'm John Doe, so remember I pass a header and say API key, my key. So now I am considered John Doe. I'm not rate limited because I was a good citizen. You can use any registration way you want. It's unrelated to the talk. At the end, it just means that if you are authenticated, you can bypass rate limiting, which is good. Okay, great. So we are close to the good stuff. Now we need to deploy the V2. And before deploying the V2, we need to do unit testing, right? So who does unit testing? But afterwards, we need to do integration testing. Who does integration testing? And who tests in production? Yeah, everybody tests in production. Everybody. And on a more serious note, you test in production because there is no way that you can test every single production workload. I was bitten by it. I was working on an Espresso application. We wanted to have scenarios that we could reproduce. It was impossible. Every client at some point would make a request that was not expected. So at some point you need to test in production. So even if you have 100% code coverage, 100% unit test coverage, and 100% integration test coverage, you need to test in production because there won't be 100% chance that nothing breaks. But you can limit the risk. The first thing is you can think about canary release, which is a good idea, but even before canary release, what we can do is we can split the traffic, monitor the HTTP status code on both V1 and V2, and just discard V2. And if the curves look similar, then actually you can release with more confidence. So before doing canary release, we can do that. And in API 6, it's called mirror traffic. So again, everything is a plugin, proxy rewrite, proxy mirror. So here, there is something interesting. Proxy rewrite, you remember, I removed the v1 prefix with proxy rewrite, right? And now there is proxy mirror where I will fork the traffic. The fun stuff is in API 6, every plugin has a priority. That's how API 6 knows, hey, first I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. And by default, the proxy mirror has a higher priority than proxy rewrite. So first, it will fork v1/hello, and then it will remove the prefix, which is not what we want. So we need to be a bit smarter. We need to increase the priority of proxy rewrite. So first, it removes the prefix, and it just forwards hello afterwards. And I'm very proud of this feature because when I joined the project 1.5 years ago, it was not possible. So for a long time, for 6 months, I had this demo and I said, hey, it doesn't work. But now it works, hopefully. Okay, let's do a couple of calls. And let's check the local hosts, and I think it's 3000 for Grafana and APISIX. So this is the default dashboard that I copy-pasted again, and I added this one, that like these 2 widgets. By the way, whoever has like created the Grafana dashboard or updated it, it really sucks, right? Yeah, great. And now you can check that here you have the same curves. Of course, the beginning of the curve here is just for this one, so you need to check the ending of the curve. So let's pretend everything works as expected, and actually you see 200, 200, 200, 200, so it looks pretty good. We have the same status codes on the left and on the right. So now it's time for the good old canary release. Canary release, anybody? So instead of releasing to everybody, we release to a fraction of the users. It can be based on the header, it can be based on an IP, or it can be just general. APISIX supports everything, but just because for demo purposes, I will use like 50-50. So first, I create a dedicated upstream, so that's my second upstream for V2. And then I use the traffic split, and I say weighted upstream. So the upstream 2 will have weight 1, the upstream 1 will have weight 1, so it will, thanks. Okay, so traffic split, another plugin. So as I mentioned, I create a dedicated upstream for V2. Then I change, so I patch the plugin config, and here I will remove the proxy mirror and I will replace it with traffic split, and then I define weighted upstream. So upstream 2 will have weight 1, upstream 1 will have weight 1, we'll give it like a 50-50% chance because for the demo it's better. Of course, normally it would probably be, let's say 99.1, then you will move to 95.5 and so on and so forth until you are sure that everything works as expected. But here, for reasons obvious, I will do 50-50. And I will do it like this. Oh, I already have. So half of the traffic will be directed to the new version, half will be directed to the old version. Good. We are nearly at the end. We can deploy the V2, everything is fine. But now the problem is we have multiple versions. Now we will have V3, V4, V5, whatever. If you are a product manager, you know this is bad. Because now you need to divide your engineering resources among all those versions. So you want to limit the number of parallel versions that you have. And of course, it depends on your context. Sometimes you can say, I only have 2, sometimes you can have 5, it depends. But we need to somehow tell people, hey, we will actually deprecate this route. And for that, there is an ITF draft. So it's not release, it's just a draft, but it's the best we can do so far. So we will use it, and it's very easy. It's a deprecation header on the response. It can be a Boolean, which I will use in the demo, but of course you shouldn't do it, right? Because it just tells you, hey, now don't use it. Normally it should be a date, and the date should be in the future, of course, at least when you first release it, right? Then you have in the header the link of the new API to use. And if you really want to go the full 9 yards, then actually you can also have a sunset header. So deprecation means you shouldn't use it after this date, but normally it should still work. Sunset is after this date, it will be completely removed. So first you warn people, and then you remove it. That's actually the easiest thing to do with here. So I create the V2 routes, So I already created the upstream. So I create the V2 route. I apply the exact same plugin as before. And then I deprecate the V1 route. I'm just checking, yes. So here, I'm using the plugin from config. I'm patching it. I remove the traffic splits. And then I add a plugin response rewrite where I had these headers. So deprecation set to true, and then the link. I'm reusing the nginx variable. So it makes it much, much easier. I don't need to hard code anything. And then if I curl, and I make it verbose, you can see deprecation equals to true. Again, Boolean, not good, date should be. And then you have the link of the resource to use. And again, this is a very, very important lesson, even if you are an API consumer, that you should monitor usage and headers that just appear in your stuff, because it can mean a lot of different things. Right? If you automate everything, you will never see it. You need to be aware of it. And folks, I think it's good. At this point, I believe that if you did everything I showed you, when business comes for V3, that's the next step. You can enjoy life. The good thing in everything that I showed you is that you can do it afterwards, after you have released the version, right? But it will be much more comfortable if you plan for it ahead. So if you already have an API, you can use these steps. If you are creating a new API, you do everything before, and your life will be much easier. So thanks for your attention. You can follow me on Twitter, even I think Twitter is dead. You can follow him on Mastodon. Blue Sky seems to be super popular at the moment. Very important, if you are interested in the code, you can do everything at home. Everything is on GitHub. As showed you, you don't need anything but Docker. So, and even not Docker compatible stuff, because it's only a Docker compose file. And if I got you interested in Apache APISIX, though the talk was not about it, you are welcome to have a look. That's how I can come here and make a talk. Thanks a lot. I was on time. There are 3 minutes left. So basically, you have got one more question, perhaps, before we switch, and I have got stickers. Yes. Oh, you have multiple questions. I will stay there until this afternoon, so if I cannot answer them all, please. Please. Yes.
Thank you. My question is not about the talk itself, but more about the Apache organization, because I would like to know how is it possible to join this open source organization, and how can be the step? Maybe you can answer me briefly, because it can be long. Thank you.
Yeah, it's thanks for the question. So how you can join any open source project, you start contributing, right? And you don't need to be a coder. Like, for example, I know nothing about Lua, but I opened a lot of bugs. For example, I improve the documentation and stuff like this. And once you start regularly contributing to a project, then at some point you will be approached by the committers who will offer you to be a committer. Yeah, the organization itself, you are not part of Apache, you are part of a project. You can be part of multiple projects, but actually, just so you understand, you won't earn any money being part of Apache. It's just, you are part of the project and you are contributing to the project. Yes, exactly. Thanks. Yeah, another question, I will repeat the question so I don't need to move back and forth. Let's start with one.
The first one is really quick. So you have to write plugins in Lua.
So the question is, do I have to write the plugins in Lua with Apache APISIX? The long answer is no. You have multiple ways to do that. You have Java, Go, Python, Lua. I would recommend you to use Lua, because I checked the Java stuff. It's not really great. What we are trying to do, what I'm pushing toward, is to remove all the support for every language, and we just support WebAssembly. And then on the provider side, on our side, it's much easier to support one single stuff, and then it's in your stack. It's very easy to have something that generates WebAssembly. So, yeah, second question?
The second question is, where do you deploy the API 6? Because if it's a single, if you deploy it on a single virtual machine, then it's kind of
So the question is on deployment. So first, let me tell you that I'm a developer advocate, so I have no production experience, right? So I'm talking in theory. But the idea is you can deploy it on multiple nodes. That's not an issue. Then you have an IP sprayer, right? And then there are two deployment modes. The first mode is using etcd as configuration, so all the nodes share the same configuration. It's not an issue. The other way is to have what they call standalone mode, right? So there are static files on each node, and probably you do GitOps, so you also have only one single source of truth, and it's not an issue if one node fails. So in both cases, whatever the deployment you choose, you should have multiple nodes, and you should have an IP sprayer in front just in case one of the nodes crashes. And I think we are good, right? Thanks a lot. I will stay there until this afternoon. Just find me if you have more questions. Stickers. See you. Grazie a tutti.